Hey guys, okay, so we are going to move on to the next topic now. This should still be review, all right? It's going to cover a little bit of what you did last year. You should have hit it in Algebra 1. If not, you would have hit it in pre-algebra, all right? Just a few things before we get started. First, make sure that if you are watching this, that you take notes, all right? If you can't keep up with whatever I'm writing, pause the video, write everything down, and then listen to what I'm saying. All right, remember you need the notes in class tomorrow if you plan on getting a grade for this. So first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to go over, kind of recall what slope is. So remember, slope is the y minus y over x minus x. Okay, so make sure you remember it doesn't really matter which point comes first as long as you use the same y and x point that you used to start with. All right, so if I look at this graph that we have here, all right, this first point is at 4, 0, okay? The second point is at, it looks like it's at 7, 2. All right, so what we're going to do is we are just going to take those points and we are going to plug them in order to figure out what the slope is. So down here I'm going to rewrite my formula, y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over x sub 1 minus x sub 2. It doesn't matter which one you start with, so I'm going to start with the 7, but that means when I start with the, or I'm going to start with the 2, but when I start with the x's, I'm going to have to start with the 7. Okay, so I'm going to have 2 minus, so my other y is 0, over my x, which is 7 minus 4. And then I'm going to simplify, so I'm going to get 2 over 3. So that means that the slope is 2 over 3. So if I check that and I look at this point, in order to get from this point to this point, remember it's rise over run. All right, so rise over run, that's why the x's or the y's are on top. Okay, so if we look, we went up 2 over 3 in order to get to that second point, right? Which would mean 2 over 3 would be correct. So the new stuff is we're going to look at, okay, well, what happens when we have special lines, all right? So we've got two special types of lines that we're going to talk about today, parallel and perpendicular. So I'm going to start with parallel lines, and we know that parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. They don't ever touch. They go on forever, and they will never touch no matter how far you go, right? So the first rule that we're going to talk about is if two lines are parallel, then we know their slopes are equal, okay? I don't like that gray. Their slopes are always going to be the same if they are parallel. All right, that'll always happen. That's true. We don't have to prove it. It's already been proven. We just go with it. All right, so when we look at this first example, write the equation of the line parallel. That right there is really important, okay? To the line y equals negative 4x plus 1 that passes through the point 6, negative 1. So what we're looking for is a line that goes through this and is parallel to this. Well, based off of this up here, we know that if the line is parallel, it's going to have the same slope, right? So I'm going to look at this equation, and if we remember y equals mx plus b form, all right, that's a line, right? We know that the m is our slope. So the slope of this line is negative 4, and if they're going to be equal, we know the slope of our line has to be negative 4 as well. All right, just based off the fact that it says parallel. If it wouldn't have told us that they were parallel, we wouldn't be able to do anything here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use y equals mx plus b, all right, because we have to write an equation, and whenever it tells you to write an equation of a line, you always want to use y equals mx plus b unless it tells you different. That's the easiest form you can find. All right, so we're going to plug that negative 4 in, so I've got y equals negative 4x plus b. So what we need to figure out now is we need to figure out that b. So what we're going to do is that's where this part comes in, all right? This is our x, this is our y. We're going to plug those into this formula. So I said my y was negative 1, my x is 6. Now I only have one variable in the equation, so now I can go ahead and I can solve for b. So I have negative 1 equals negative 4 times 6 is going to be negative 24, and then that plus b just stays there, and now this is just a one-step equation. I'm going to add 24 to both sides in order to get b by itself. So I'm going to get b equals negative 1 plus 24 is going to be 23. Right? But I'm not done because remember the original question, what it wanted us to find was it wanted us to write an equation. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it back into there. So I'm going to have y equals negative 4x plus 23. Okay, and remember, the only reason we were able to do that is because of this rule up here that tells us, if it tells us two lines are parallel, if that's something that we know, then we know that their slopes have to be the same. Okay, so now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to look at this second example. All right, it says prove that the lines above are parallel. So if we think about this, in order for them to be parallel, so if they are, we don't know if they are or not, that means, based off of what we just learned, that the slopes have to be equal. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to find the slope of each line. We're going to find the slope of the black line, then we're going to find the slope of the pink line, and if they end up being the same, they're parallel. If they're not, then we can say no, they're not parallel because of this. All right, so first I'm going to look at the black line, and the points are 3, 0, 0, negative 2. Okay, this is my x sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 1, y sub 2. And then I'm going to rewrite my formula. Remember, same thing as everything else whenever we're working with a formula. For the first few examples you do, write the actual formula down before you do any work. That way eventually you don't have to memorize it. Okay, so we've got y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over x sub 1 minus x sub 2. Doesn't matter which one comes first, but whichever one I start with, that's what I have to start with on both the y's and the x's. All right, so my y sub 1 I have marked as 0, and then my y sub 2 is negative 2, so minus negative 2, over my x sub 1 is 3, my x sub 2 is 0, so 3 minus 0. Now, make sure you don't mess this up right here, okay, what I just kind of dotted around. If I have minus a negative, that's going to, two negatives are going to turn into a positive. So that's really going to be 0 plus 2. So I'm going to have 2 on top. 3 minus 0. Oh, this one ended up being the same. Look at that. Okay. Over 3. That's my slope of just the black line. All right. Now I have to do the exact same thing for the pink line. So pink, we've got 6, negative 10 over 4. Comma. That's not right. Okay, the 4 negative 10 is right. This point should be, let's see, it went over 10, so it should be 10, negative 6. Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did with the black. So I'm going to label it x sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 1, y sub 2. All right, and then I'm going to plug in. So I've got my y sub 1 is negative 6. My y sub 2 is negative 10. Be careful there. Make sure you write both of those. All right, my x sub 1 is 10 minus 4. All right, so 10 minus, or negative 6 minus negative 10. That's going to be negative 6 plus 10. All right, I'm going to write this one just because it's a little more complicated than the other one since the other one is a 0. So negative 6 plus 10 over 10 minus 4 is going to be 6. Negative 6 plus 10 is going to give me positive 4 over 6. Now, we look at that at first and we say, okay, that's not the same as the one above. But if I simplify this, that's going to end up being 2 over 3. So we can say, yes, they are, and I'm going to simplify, parallel because the slopes are equal. Okay? Now, you're going to hate me for this. I'm going to show you a super simple way you could have done that. I can start at this point right here on the black line and go up 1, 2 over 3. And I know that my slope is 2 over 3. Here I can do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this would be 4 over 6, which is exactly what we just did. All right, but for the first few examples, I want you actually doing the math. That way you understand it. All right, very last thing we're going to talk about is slopes of perpendicular lines now. Okay, so this is a little different, but we still have a rule that makes our life a little bit easier. All right, so if we have two lines and we know for a fact they are perpendicular, all right, we know that their slopes are going to be opposite reciprocals. Okay, what that means is you're going to flip the fraction, okay, and you're going to change the sign. Okay, so flip the fraction, change the sign. So when I look at this first example, all right, write an equation. As soon as we see that, we know we're going to work with y equals mx plus b. It's just like the last one. Of the line perpendicular to the line y equals negative 4x plus 1 that passes through the point 6 comma negative 1. All right, so we're going to go through the same exact process that we did before. All right, we're going to look at the slope of this line and we're going to say, okay, because it's perpendicular, we know we have to change the sign. So the negative 4 is going to go to a positive 4. And we have to flip the fraction. But here's the problem. 4 isn't really a fraction, right? There's nothing on the bottom. You can put that over 1 and it'd be the same, right? So the negative 4 went to a positive 4. And then the 4 is going to flip to a 1 over 4. So our new slope is going to be 1 over 4. So let's go back up here. If I would have given you that the slope is negative 2 over 3, and I told you perpendicular, you would make it a positive 2 over 3, and then you would flip it to 3 over 2. Okay, as long as both of these things happen, then you're good. So we go back here, and we're going to plug that new slope in. So y equals 1 over 4x plus b. And we're going to do the same thing with this point, and we're going to plug our x into the equation, and we're going to plug our y into the equation. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 1 as my y equals 1 over 4 times 6 plus b. And then we go through, and we're going to solve for b. So I've got negative 1 equals 1 over 4 times 6. I want to keep these as fractions because I do not like working with decimals. I'm going to have 6 over 4 plus b. Okay, subtract 6 over 4 from both sides. Okay, negative 1 is really negative 4 over 4. So I'm going to get b equals negative 10 over 4. You can simplify that to be negative 5 over 2. Okay, and then your last step is to go back and plug it into that equation with your new slope. So you're going to have y equals 1 over 4x minus 5 over 2. Okay, so we are going to do a lot of examples on this tomorrow in class. Make sure you bring your notes with you because you'll be able to use them on the first few. Okay, so moral of the story, the major concepts here are parallel lines have same slope, okay, and perpendicular lines have opposite, which means flip. No, it doesn't. Opposite, which is change the sign, and reciprocal. Why can I not spell today? Reciprocal, which is flip. Okay, as long as you have this in class tomorrow, you'll be able to do the worksheet. All right, so make sure you bring your notes. If you had questions, write the questions down or highlight where you got stuck, and you can ask them tomorrow in class, and we will go over those before we start the worksheet. Good job, guys.